Hmm. So I just watched a video. I'm guessing it's New Zealand or Australia by the accent. Um. Anyways, it was a small time farmer. I guess it's sheep or goats. Uh, versus this vegan girl called Vegan Booty, and her entire arguments are based on what factory farming does, which like you can go around to a lot of farmers like family farms and they'll agree factory farming it ain't right. But she just assumes every single farm is like that, and some of her claims are like just outright wrong. uh, like she said farming kills like 3 trillion livestock annually. Like after some Google searching here, what I found is there's roughly 33 billion domestic chickens worldwide, 1.3 billion sheep, a billion cattle, about a billion pigs, about 800 million goats, and like less than 10 million camels, llamas, emus. Um, like other domesticated livestock breeds are even in lower numbers than that. And adding it all up, it's not even 50 billion. So how in the common core math does she get 3 trillion killed annually? Like, is every domesticated animal on the planet killed at least once a week? Like, wow. And then she's making all these arguments while wearing a bunch of makeup. Like, did she source that makeup from companies that do not test on animals? Did she know what chemicals are used in those makeups and if any of the waste leaches into the waterways? At the same time, she also uses industrial made chemicals to do something as vain as dye her hair. Again, does she know that those chemicals tend to end up in waterways, which just aren't really good for anybody? Like I said, factory farming, not cool. Um, but on top of that, like, or I should say, in addendum to what I just witnessed on this video, there seems to be a lot of people that just have no clue about what goes on a regular family farm and the regulations and legislation that kind of mm, keeps farms having to run a certain way. Like I'm in Alberta, Canada, uh, and farmers, like ranchers and stuff, can't just sell their beef to individuals. Really, like it has to be government. The meat has to be government inspected before you can sell it to the public. And like years ago, the Hutterites, like we have colonies of Hutterites all over Canada, and they're huge groups. Like they have enough pull that when they go buy farm equipment, they don't have to buy from dealerships. They can go straight to manufacturers. Anyways, they used to sell. You used to be able to go to Hutterites and buy like a side of pork, a side of beef. But that a large majority of that started getting shut down as they used to have government inspectors go to all these colonies and inspect their herds, inspect their flocks, and make sure that things were good. But governments kind of have shut down on the inspectors, so it's very hard to be able to get an inspector. So guess what? You can only sell your beef wholesale to the slaughterhouses. Like Name another industry anywhere that does anything that on average has to buy everything at retail price but has to sell all of their product at wholesale, right? Like grain farmers got to go to the dealership, buy their equipment, got to go to parts places to buy their parts. They got to go get like get their oils, get their fuels, all of that. Like, well, fuel you can get dyed fuel on the farm, um, but yeah, like oils, you've got to get your pesticides, fertilizers, whatever. You can only buy it at retail price. But when it comes time to sell the grain, you're selling at wholesale, and like the prices have not at all for the last 100 years kept up with inflation. Like you go back 100 years, like the prices maybe tripled in 100 years for the bushel of grain, maybe quadrupled. But you used to be able to go get, a meal for 25 cents, 50 cents 100 years ago, a dollar maybe. Like now a meal up here in Canada, if it's a half decent meal, it's at least like $25. How much has a loaf of bread gone up in the last 100 years? And I mean, from a bushel of grain, you can make a fair amount of loaves of bread. And I'm pretty sure that right now, price of a bushel is less than $5. Actually, I'm not even sure if it's at $4. But yeah, it just baffles me. Like people just want to shit on farmers, but it's like the farmers can only do what the government will allow them to do, and they're not making huge money. Like the only places really making money off of it are the middlemen, like the slaughterhouses and stuff, and these factory farms. And that's kind of what helps drive the price down on family farms is the factory places, because the way they mistreat animals and just don't really give a shit allows them to keep their prices cheap. And then family farms where, like the neighbor down the road, while their kids are older now, but they used to always have a 4-H beef cattle that their kids raise, like one animal per kid that was hand brushed. And I mean, yeah, I know there's ranchers that aren't hand brushing their cattle, but they're checking their herds daily, making sure that they've got lots of pasture. And you go to these factory farms, like cattle are shoved into these little pens and just trouncing around in their own shit and piss. Have nowhere to lay but some damp straw in the corner that's covered in their shit and piss. But people just make the generalization that that's all farmers. And it's like, no, like real farmers that care about their land, that care about their herds, they do their best to do things as humanely as possible. But it's slowly getting harder and harder because governments keep passing more legislation, more regulations. And they don't seem to ever push back at the factory farm kind of things, like for humane treatment of animals. No, it's just regulations that end up for farmers to have to pay for permits or getting like different like now in Canada they're pushing not to be able to use industrial fertilizers, and that's not going to work well because if you're growing grain crops, you need a certain chemical, like chemical profile. And I don't mean like industrial or elemental profile, like a soil test sample that shows, hey, you've got this much nitrogen in the soil, this much zinc, this much carbon, this much hydrogen, this much potassium, yada yada. To know, like, okay, well, I should be running this much fertilizer per acre so that when I grow crops, I'm not just leaching everything out of the soil and making it a barren wasteland. But yeah, people just, I don't know. We've gotten so out of touch with how things are actually done. So many people just make these wrong assumptions. And we've got to stop. Like, we got to start thinking about, where does our food come from? Like, it doesn't just magically appear on your shelves. And maybe we need some pushback against these. Well, I would say yes, we do need some pushback against these factory farms. But at the same time, it can't just lead to more regulation across the board. Like, maybe we should start looking at these family operations where they do their uh, rotation of crops and livestock in the pastures and stuff, and start seeing, like, hey, that's sustainable and it's done in a humane fashion. Like, instead of shitting on it, maybe we should commend that. Maybe we should, like, we got to change something. I understand that, but, like, if you're a city person advocating against farming and have never grown a scrap of food in your life, like, you're not really helping solve the problem. You're just helping create more negativity and adding to the problem. And it's starting to get worrisome because, like, keep driving up the costs. Farmers are just going to start going broke. And then we're going to have even more food shortage. Like, do these people just want all the poor people to starve or what? Like, I just can't wrap my head around how they figure that they're doing the right thing when they don't really do anything other than bitch and moan. I don't know. If you've got ideas and you've got above room temperature IQ, feel free to leave a comment that tells me what you think could be done, please, because I'm running out of ideas here.